All right. So the big question is, have you ever printed with polypropylene before? It's PP is the filament, and it can be kind of tricky. I ran into a project the other day that it required some fairly large pieces, right? It's not like a little piece or something like this. They were fairly large and very thick, right? They're probably 5 millimeters, maybe, or 200 thousandths thick, and they wanted them solid, right? It's not like it just had 2 or 3 walls and 15% infill or something like that. It was like they wanted it solid. So it took a little while to print, and it was really tricky. Now the polypropylene has, you run into the same problems with any other filament, where you're worried about it adhering to the plate, and or if there's going to be any warping involved. You got to worry about the same things, but polypropylene behaves totally very different. I should say not totally different, but very different. For one thing, you'll notice that that it's not hygroscopic, so I still put them in my my dryers and use that as the spool, to go to my P1 the P1S's. But I didn't have to worry about drying the stuff and all that, right? And I asked around because there's quite a bit. There's quite a few different temperature settings to look up. What is it? I played with the temperature settings for the nozzle and the bed, the fan speeds, and then even ended up trying different brands of polypropylene. So, well, let's take a look at what I found out. So I did a little research when I first got started with it, and a lot of guys are saying, use tape, to get it to stick to the bed, and just regular packing tape, right? No, not masking tape or anything like that. Packing tape. It's like, well, that was interesting. So I just researched why. I mean, it was basically packing tape, and you need to double check this, but a lot of the packing tape will have a polypropylene backing on it. So when you put that stuff down on the bed, the polypropylene will stick to polypropylene, right? So I tried that, and then I started reading about the glues, specific glue to use, because it's not your normal, Elmer's purple stuff. It's this stuff I use. It's Maggie goo, and it's made specifically for polypropylene. And the good thing about this, by the way, I started looking up on Maggie goo and started looking up about what's up with their glue, right? Well, they have a database on all the number of filaments that they've tested with, and that was a great set of data. You can go through, and they even had was it Braskem was the first polypropylene I used. Well, they had a whole database on it too. So it gave me a good baseline to start testing with. Now back to the tape. I had some packing tape. Wasn't quite sure if it had polypropylene on it or not. So I looked it up. I looked up Scotch, and they have all the data sheets on all their tapes and everything. And the tape I had was actually a pretty good tape, and it had polypropylene backing and all that good stuff. So I tried it too. So that gave me a baseline to start with, right? I had some past figures that Maggie Goo had used as far as for temperature, and of course, the manufacturer of the polypropylene, they have their own recommended print settings. And this was pretty common along with all the other data I found, that from anywhere from 220 to 240 C for the extruder temperature, and I ended up normalizing on 230. It seemed like it it flowed very well and the layer stuck. So I stuck with that. Recommended bed temperatures 60 to 80 they were giving on this. And on the Maggie Goo site, I believe they were saying 100 to start with and down to 90, or 110 down to 100. So their temperatures were way up there. Printing speed, you know, the first layer I had it down at 40, I believe, and then for normal printing speed, I slowed it way down, at least for these, you know, P1Ps and the Bamboo Lab stuff. I went to 80 for the outer walls, and I think 100 on the inner walls. So that's actually pretty slow for these printers, right? Well, that's what my baseline printing. And the first time I did it, I tried the polypropylene on just every type of bed that I had. The cold plates, the high temp plate, the engineering plate, and then the textured PEI plate from Bamboo Labs. And without any glue or tape, it would not stick to anything, right? Yeah, there's a sample I'll show you here in a minute. And so the first thing I tried, since I already had the tape on hand, well, I tried applying the tape to one of the beds, right? And this, I just wanted the smooth bed, so I just put it on the high temp plate and put glue on, and I used one of these scrapers, you know, as a squeegee, you know, to make sure there's not going to be any air bubbles or anything underneath the tape. And I tried with that at first. I went ahead and ordered the Maggie Goo glue, and while I was waiting, I just tried it with the tape. And when I put all that on, at first it seemed like it was printing fairly well, right? It seemed like it was adhering to the tape, but with the high temp on the beds from 80, and I think I was trying it at 100 at the time, some bubbles started to form underneath the tape. Now I know I squeegeed all the air out of it, so I don't know if it's just the adhesive that was on the tape was giving out, or the adhesive under that temperature, maybe it was letting off some fumes and gases and stuff, and that was causing these bubbles. And when the bubbles appear, and then, well, it wasn't going to hold that piece, you know. I had a bunch of old samples here. So here's the bottom of one of them, and you'll see, I'll get a close-up for you, but it looks like it's concave or whatever. It starts to bend upwards, and when that happened on the tape, then you can see, you can tell it was just taking it right off the bed, right? Now I tried that with the tape on just every, you know, bed mat that I had, right, on every plate, but that didn't seem to work. When I got through with that, my tape, the glue came in, right? So in this case, I went ahead and just went straight to the textured PEI and put glue on it, and that seemed to be working pretty well, right? Up to a point. After it started to get thicker like this, before it could ever start the walls, well, it was happening again. This thing, it was just tearing and the settings that I have on this, you can see the size of the brim, right? They were, you know, 20 millimeter brim. And while I was doing that, and I'll show you some of the settings that I used, mainly the slow speed. I had the brim on it was very wide, and they recommend, just about everybody, you know, was recommending a 20 millimeter brim, so I put that on there, and that seemed to work. But then sooner or later, it was still tearing it up, and I mean even the brims, and you can see the bubbles coming up. It's just discolored, and it was just taking it right off. But here I'll show you let me show you the settings that I put on this thing before I go any further. Well, okay, so you can see I'm using Creo, and I just slapped this little test box up there. This is not not one of the pieces that, not one of the thick pieces that I had to make. I didn't want to show you too much detail on that, but this will go just fine. So you can see I'm using this PS1, the high temp plate. Well, actually, I did it on the textured PEI plate. Now here's the filament that I used. I saved it as the Braskem PP FL100, but you can see here when I tried to set the filament, I mean there's nothing here for PP, for polypropylene. So I just randomly took the generic PETG and I did do a flow calibration on it, so it was 0.040. And I came over here, and this is where I changed the filament. It's PETG. Like I said, there's no PP, no polypropylene, but I just labeled it, you know, the Braskem, and made my settings accordingly, which between 220 and 250. So I set the nozzle at 230. This is what I ended up with. On the high temp plate at 100, the textured PEI plate I set at 80 for the first layer, and then go down to 70. The cooling, you can see the fans here. So for the first 3 layers, there's no cooling. And the minimum fan speed and max fan speed, so you can see the 10% and 20%. So the fans, while they're always on, there's only 20%, and I could probably go down to 10, but it seemed to work okay that way. And auxiliary part cooling fan 0, didn't want anything there. So that was my settings, and then I renamed it, you know, the Braskem PP, so I'll know what's going on. So here I labeled this the standard for polypropylene, and quality wise it was pretty standard settings here. The first layer, when I tried Braskem, because I'm going to probably rename this and go with Arion. That's probably going to be my default setting. Well, let's see. No, I mean let's see. Let's rename this. Arion. Everything else is going to stay the same. I'm just going to change the oops. And I'll label it white because I know I can get it in black. And I can also get it with carbon fiber or glass fiber. So here I'll know what's going on. Let's see. Let's go back to the quality. The first layer, I even tried a larger, the 0.55 millimeter, and that was a little much. But all that stayed on. There's no ironing. only one wall on first layer, and I'll uncheck that. And strength, okay, the piece that I made, it was very thick. Like I said, it was what, 5 millimeters or so, or 200 thousandths solid. So I made 6 wall loops and went ahead and set the density, the infill at 100%. But with the walls like this, I mean, it was like a big cup, and that filled it up there. Let's see, speed wise, you can see 40 millimeters per second for the first layer, for the infill at 80, but you can see I set the outer wall at 80, the inner wall at 100, and for these Bamboo Lab machines, that's pretty slow. And when I'm looking at it, the sparse infill, I could have set all this down. I could probably print these on one of my Ender 3s that I've modified. I can go up to 80 with those. So yeah, I probably could print that on one. They're not enclosed, but as long as there's no draft. But anyway, let's move on. There was no support needed on it. It's just like this cube, right? There's no support needed. So for bed adhesion, I didn't want any loops, but you can see the brim type. I did outer and inner because those pieces that I showed you, it did have like a hole, like a donut hole, and I went in and put it on the inner on that also. But the brim width is 20 millimeter, and the brim object gap is 0. So you can see the edges here. Yeah, I didn't want any gap between the brim and the part. On here, some of the settings, you see a gap there, a very small gap, and they're saying, yeah, it'll help hold it on, but it'll make it easier to take it off, to remove the brim once it's finished. And I was like, no, I need that brim to hold on, and I'll clean it up afterwards. Let's see, I think that was it. Yeah, so those are the basic settings that I used, and you can tweak it from there. Yeah, so you can see at that time when I was doing all my settings and everything, there was nothing, there was no preset anything for polypropylene, and so I just ended up labeling it as a PETG and then going in and modifying everything to fit the parameters that I want, as far as temperature, and then labeled it, the Brescum whatever polypropylene, but just started from scratch, right? But I guess the temperature and all that stuff and the bed setting wasn't uncommon, so it was no big deal. But you can see that's the way I ended up doing it there. And I tried both, mainly in Orca. I tried in Studio at one point and did the X1 carbon, and I'll show you that a little later. But for these first tests, I used Orca, and I used these the P1S's. So after all that, I tried the tape, I tried the glue, I tried different temperature settings, I tried all the different build plates. I mean, I tried everything, and sooner or later it just started to lift off of there. It was just warping big time, and that's even with cutting the fans off. I had, you name it. So I was running out of time, and I went ahead and I thought, I'm going to try a different brand of polypropylene, and of course I went straight to Amazon because they had a few choices, and I can get them here the fastest, right? And the strange thing, because I did a little research on that also, and looked around at some of the different brands, and a lot of them, they looked, I guess you can say they're more for the industrial scale, industrial applications, and they didn't have the 1.75 millimeter Filament. I mean, all their stuff, you know, you get the thicker stuff, the 2.85 or whatever it is. That's all it was available in, right? So I got to Amazon and got 2 more brands in, and lo and behold, let's see. Yeah, one of them was there. Eryon, E-R-Y-O-N-E, Airy one, and it was on Amazon, and luckily it was during the holiday season, gearing up for it, and I got it at a good price. And lo and behold, man, I put that on there, and I went straight to the textured PEI bed, and yeah. So I went straight to that, applied glue. You can see some of the glue around these outer edges that were left. But I put that on there, and the filament, you know, that first print, that first layer, man, it was coming out great. And I could tell it was still trying to warp, just kind of like this. When you're looking at, this is just a sample for a little box. But when you look at it real close, you can see the bubbles here on the corner. That's it lifting the brim off of there. Well, it was doing it with these pieces like this, very large, very thick, solid pieces, and it was trying. I mean, it was really trying to lift it off, but it was successful. It wasn't totally flat, but it looks like it was acceptable. And I'm probably still going to try another brand, and that way at least I'll have 2 different sources for this polypropylene, just in case it comes out. And I just don't want any continuity of supply problems. I don't want to have a job coming up where I have more quantities of these things to pump out and not be able to find any filament, right? At least the stuff that's working. So I want at least 2 sources, but I know this the Airy one is going to be one of them. The other one I tried, this Braskem, and it seemed like it's doing good on the smaller, thin-walled pieces. And you can see this is real pliable. It's pretty neat stuff when you print with it. And I've seen some stuff with this before, and it's usually just like like little squeeze bottles or something, or hinges, because this stuff can bend back and forth. Yeah, look at the brim here. I mean, it's real pliable, and very durable, very tough. It's I guess FDA, I don't know, FDA approved or what. It's supposed to be food friendly, I guess you could say. But so I might still use this one brand, but not for this thicker stuff, right? So I'll be looking at that, and I guess a couple of notes on what actually happened when I was printing this stuff out. A couple of pointers. This stuff mainly I had, I was printing them on these P1Ps, and I had a new one over here that I also printed off. I had 2 of them going, and this one kept clogging. It happened a couple of times, and I finally just wait a second, and we can see with these samples I was showing you. They were turning out great, and they were sticking to the bed, but then the nozzle started to clog. And I thought about it and slept on it, and I woke up the next day and I started thinking, you know, this new one does not have, it has the stainless steel nozzle on it. All my other ones I had already converted over, and they have the hardened steel nozzles, and that's the only difference. So just a bit of info there. If you run into that problem, check and see, you know, because I switched over to the hardened steel nozzle and that solved it for some reason, you know. What else? On, let's see, the X1 carbon, I had a couple of spools up here, and I knew one of them was running out, and I still had a couple more pieces to print. So I put two of them side by side up here in on the AMS, so that if it runs out of, you know, filament, and I had it set so that if it runs out, then it'll automatically go to the next one. And it operated like a charm on the AMS, so I didn't have any problem with it. At first I was thinking, I wonder if it's going to be like TPM, because it is kind of a soft feeling filament. But there was no problem. I mean, it ran through the AMS pretty nicely. And well, I would show you the finished parts, but I've already shipped them off to the customer, and I just had a lot of this scrap. I mean, a lot of scrap. Actually, I have a whole box full of this stuff. But it was a learning experience, right? Now I know exactly what to do with polypropylene, at least for these machines. I heard some feedback that it can be done on a bed slinger. I have not tried it on the A1 yet. It's right here in front of me. I guess I could do that just out of curiosity, but that's, you know, I like the enclosed printers, and this is why with this. And because within the enclosure, you know, I can turn the fans off, and I know I don't have any, the vents are closed, everything. I'm not going to have any temperature changes within the enclosure, you know, due to outside sources or any drafts, anything like that. And it worked out perfect, you know, because with this stuff, I ended up printing at 230 degrees on the nozzle, 80 degree bed, and I cut the fans down to 10, 20% max. And that worked. And all the other fans I cut off, so there wouldn't be any other draft except for the 20% fan on the part cooler fan, so that just to make sure it's going to the layer adhesion, right? And that way it's not such a huge temperature fluctuation when it's cooling off. When it does that, this stuff really warps. That's what you got to watch out for, is any temperature fluctuation or cooling or heating or anything like that. But I guess that's it. I know it was definitely a challenge, and I learned a lot on it. So if you're going to try something with polypropylene and you have any questions, hopefully this will help you out. At least give you a baseline on what to start testing at, right? And because I found out also it does matter on the brand of filament that you use. And you can see the difference between them, especially if you're comparing the data on the Maggie Goo site and look at the different polypropylene filaments that they have. And a lot of them vary. I mean, going from, you know, needing 200 and, you know, over 230 C for the nozzle, and one of them, I think it was, I can't remember, but it was something about starting the bed at 100 degrees, but after that first layer, you might as well just cut the bed heating off completely and let it cool down while it prints the rest of the stuff. I was like, wow. I mean, it's totally different than this stuff for the breast gum. They're saying, you know, the 230 degree nozzle, but starting at 100 C and just going down to 90 and keeping it at that, and then using the 20-degree brim, and even then they were kind of vague on, well, it's recommended to, you know, use some kind of glue and stay away from temperature fluctuations, right? And I think there was another forum somewhere, and one of them it's you know, when I first found out about the tape, it was on Facebook forum, and there was a couple of guys, I can't remember their names, but you know who you are if you're watching this, and they said use the packing tape. It's like, all right, I'll try that. That was some good tips, and I guess I will try it again. I'm going to use some different tape with different adhesive on it. This stuff was some heavy-duty stuff from Scotch, 3M, and I think it was just the adhesive part of it was letting off some fumes and causing the bubbles, you know, causing the tape to rise up off the bed. But it was polypropylene, so that was good. So I'll try a different tape and see if the adhesive part will adhere to the bed better, right? If so, then that's a feasible that's a feasible option. Because this tape, I mean this glue, I'm going to keep using this for sure. This was some really good stuff after I found the filament that would work. And it seemed kind of expensive at first. I was like, man, you know, 20 bucks, 25 bucks, or whatever it was for glue. But man, it's lasting a long time, right? It's not like it's going to disappear anytime soon. You know, you put a layer on there, and I was putting multiple layers, cleaning them off, putting another layer. I mean, over and over and over. I did 14, 15, 16 different iterations, and there's still a lot of glue left. But from my understanding, once you put this on there and start printing with it, you can leave it on there for multiple prints. And I forget how many they're saying, some ungodly amount. But I just like having a fresh coating on it. But it was like 20 plus prints. I forget exactly what it is, so don't quote me on that. But I guess that is it. I'm starting to ramble again, as always, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. And if you're ever trying something with polypropylene, just establish a baseline on what your settings are going to be, because it seems like it's going to vary between manufacturers, and it's going to vary between your printer, right? So, but I guess my settings I used, they were probably, you know, right there in the middle, and then you can fluctuate from there. At least it gives you a baseline to do some stuff. But anyway, that's it for this video. So as always, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and watch for my next video.